Welcome to Family and Divorce Show on Lions Wire. Today's guest is Poonam Bhuchar, a renowned divorce journey coach and also renowned expert speaker on the subject, and also rare combination legal attorney in the field of family law and divorce. Poonam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alexander. It's a pleasure to be here.
Poonam, I've taken a look at your book. It's quite fascinating, and I watched number of your speaker engagements, your podcasts, and what strikes me is that coaching on divorce isn't really a profession to you. This is something that is very personal. Um, being an attorney is a profession, and coaching on divorce is something that you yourself went through, experienced firsthand. It was an extremely difficult experience, and I know about it firsthand because I also went through that experience. And all the emotional trauma that is related to it, and the involvement of kids in that process, which is very, very painful for the kids, for the parents. And so what I've observed, it's much more to you than just a profession. Can you shed light on your background and how you came to become coach of divorce journey, and how you got into that field?
Sure, Alexander. So I had an arranged marriage at 21, and I came from the UK to the US. I was in a family that I didn't really know, and
Arranged marriage happened in UK.
yeah, I got married in the UK, but to somebody in the US. So at the age of 21, I ended up coming to the US and leaving my family behind and joining this new family. And my gut told me that this was not right for me. And I remember this was not forced, but I remember my mum even saying, I don't know about this, like as we started to go through the process. And I still went ahead because I had experienced trauma in my teenage years and hadn't dealt with it. And then I went through this divorce. Then I got married. I went to law school while I was married. I always knew I wanted to be an attorney. And I had two beautiful children. But after 13 years, I walked away from that marriage because it was traumatic, it was abusive, it was just not the right situation in which to raise kids. Um, and I'm sure, if you were to talk to your younger self, you don't really know who you are at 21. You don't know anything about your life.
You're probably right.
And I was a lawyer. I was a corporate immigration lawyer representing Fortune 500 companies, and I was a divorce lawyer. And even though I was a divorce lawyer and I had a very good attorney represent me, my emotions got the better of me in so many situations that ultimately ended up hurting me. And there's a dichotomy in the legal system and a gap, right? So you're supposed to make these legal decisions with clarity, and that agreement governs the rest of your life and your kids' lives. And the moment that you're making those decisions, you're very confused, you're overwhelmed, you're emotionally distressed, you're trying to manage this new life, and you just don't know whether you're making the right decisions. I've had people who don't know if their attorneys are taking advantage of them. And the truth is, I've been doing this as an attorney for 24 years, the corporate immigration and the family law, and I know that there is a gap in the system. So I used to try and minimize somebody's legal fees in family law. I used to say to them, you can either pay for your kids' college or you can pay for my kids. It's totally up to you. And what I came to learn is that, through my own trauma and through going through what I devised, the SAFE method. So I went through trauma like sexual assault, divorce, attempted suicide. I lost everything after my divorce. I had to rebuild a business in 2012, and I went on to build a seven-figure business in which I traveled the world with the kids. And everybody would like, well, how did you go from there to that? And it really is mindset. It is really healing your own emotional trauma. And I used this method that I devised called the SAFE method because I felt like therapy didn't help me. And I couldn't find a way to move forward with it. So I had this own method that
So,
when I look back, that I
the,
devised
in your
called the
book,
SAFE
you are
method.
describing that method, and this is a way to deal with emotion, sort of deal with emotion, and to put yourself into a more positive, constructive, and productive track, I would say, choosing more optimal tactic for your future, as opposed to succumbing to an emotional weight of your divorce. Uh,
Absolutely.
uh, you obviously you came up with this as a response to your own divorce, correct?
That's right. To my own divorce and emotional trauma, yes.
And during your divorce, what were the stumbling blocks for which you had to fight, if you don't mind?
You mean within the
Within the
divorce?
divorce process, yes, your own divorce process.
So I think the stumbling blocks, I mean, the stumbling blocks for me were things like determining whether I wanted to stay in the house or leave the house. And leaving the house wasn't really an option for me because we bought it in the peak in 2007 and I was going through the divorce in 2009 in the beginning, and that's when the whole Lehman Brothers happened and the market tanked,
2008,
so the house
2009,
was
yeah.
underwater. So there was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to be lost. We had investment properties. I think in terms of the kids, there was an amicable agreement just because he had very busy hours. But my stumbling block was took a back seat in my career willingly because I wanted to help raise the children. But when I knew I was going to file for divorce, I had to go back to work full time. So navigating the kids' new life, my new life was a huge stumbling block, right? Because the kids are used to having me home most of the time. I also, because my ex-husband was very controlling and I was just like, even though I shouldn't have paid 50-50 of everything, I agreed to paying 50-50 of everything because as a divorce lawyer, I knew that if he did 70-30, he'd be able to pull the kids out of private school or he'd be able to do things and I would have very little say. So in doing something like that, not only was I the primary caregiver of the kids, but I also had to provide 50% of the expenses against my attorney's wishes. But I still think I made the right decision in doing that. And
Okay.
I was able to build a business and end up paying 50% of the expenses. But with that comes a lot of stress, right? Stress that you don't see, stress that you
Absolutely.
refuse to
Yep.
feel, and that catches up with you.
Absolutely. And so eventually you went through that process and you geared towards the coaching career and developed that method. Can we go through that method in little detail?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason that I switched to coaching was because it's a passion of mine in terms of the gap in the system in any kind of emotional trauma. So the SAFE method is something I use with my divorce coaching clients. I use it with any kind of emotional trauma. And believe it or not, I've even used it in my business to manage my emotions. So basically, we all look to be emotionally safe. That's what we all seek in any environment. And the truth is, the way your divorce plays out is not based on the most amazing attorney that you have, although that helps, but it's really based on your reactions and your emotions to that divorce. So often when we're in these situations, we're confused, we're angry, we're mad, and we're sad. So S stands for stop and accept you're in pain. If you don't, you're going to come crashing down. Even a train has to stop at a train station, or, it crashes, very much like our emotions. We can keep pretending that we're on the hamster wheel and everything's fine, and we can keep driving everything with anger, but it actually has physical manifestations. So for me, it led me to have 2 strokes. It led me to have a surgery because that emotional stress overtook me. When you give yourself the permission to stop and acknowledge that you're in pain, you give yourself the room and space to say, this hurts. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to shove it under a rug, but this actually hurts me and I want to start to deal with it. And that is the first step to just taking a breath and calming down. And I have a different types of modalities that we use to acknowledge that pain. It can be journaling, walking, yoga, hypnotherapy, whatever modality works for the particular client. The A is accept responsibility for the decisions that you've made and where you are. Now, that doesn't mean that we're to blame for everything that happens in our lives. But I work with clients, and I can assure you, if we go back to childhood or our teenage years, we can come up with the patterns of why we're feeling a certain way. Mm-hmm. And when you recognize those patterns, it's easy to accept responsibility for where you are. So, for instance, in my case, I was in an abusive marriage because I ended up being in that because I didn't deal with the emotional trauma as a teenager. I was feeling insecure. I didn't love myself. So I felt that this is what I deserved. But the minute I recognized that pattern for myself, I realized I needed to start loving myself and deserved more. When you accept responsibility, you empower yourself versus playing the victim. It's easy to get comfortable playing the victim. Well, you know what? I deserve to be angry, mad, and sad because all these crappy things happen to my life, and that justifies why I stay stuck where I am. Whereas when you accept responsibility, you empower yourself and you come up with a plan to move forward. The F is forgiveness, and I talk about 3 types of forgiveness. Forgiveness of the person that you perceive has hurt you, because it is a perception. Often the people that have hurt us don't even realize it, or they don't even care, and they've moved on to do the things that they want to do. But when we sit in that anger, we really just burn ourselves, right? We don't hurt the other person. It's like we're stuck in that past and we haven't moved on. And forgiveness is not something that I do for any type of altruistic reason. I do it because I want to move forward in my life. And it's not something that happens overnight. But I found by humanizing the person and understand and empathizing with them, it's easy for me to forgive. So in the case of my ex, he has his own story. He has his own trauma that he came into the marriage with. I have my own. None of us were taught to deal with it. And therefore, it was an explosion, right? Because he only knew one way to deal with something. I only came from insecurity and whatever and knew another way. And because of that, we were in the situation we were. Should he have known better? Absolutely. But I understand, I can empathize and humanize and just say that he's a human being that has his own issues to deal with. The second type of forgiveness I talk about is forgiveness of the universe. How many of us sit there and say, why does this always happen to me? Why am I always the one going through this, right? Maybe we've got lessons to learn. Maybe this is our journey, and no journey is the same. So stop comparing. Stop comparing to your friends. Stop comparing to your colleagues, because your journey is your journey, and maybe there are lessons that each of us have to learn. And maybe, just maybe, I had to go through those things so that I can be on this podcast, Alexander, and talk to you about this, so in the hopes of healing somebody else. Mm-hmm. The minute you start to realize that we're all connected and the universe is really on our side, is when you stop seeing things as happening to you, but start to seek the lessons of why things are happening to you. What is it that I need to learn from this? What is it that from this that is going to make me a better person? The third type of forgiveness that I talk about, which for me was the hardest, is forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for the decisions that you've made, knowingly or unknowingly, that may have hurt people, that may have hurt your children, because I didn't take care of my own emotional trauma. And committing to being the better version of yourself. And when you learn to forgive yourself, you go into the loving yourself process, which really is filling your cup. So when you stop and accept that you're in pain, accept responsibility, and go through forgiveness, there's a release that happens in time and a liberation. And that's when you get to the E, which is embrace. And that is embrace not just the good things about you, embrace your flaws, embrace the mistakes you've made, because that really does. That's when you really become comfortable in your own skin. And nowadays, everybody talks about manifestation. And I believe you cannot manifest what you want in life until you really know who you are and get comfortable in your own skin. And that, in a nutshell, really is the safe method. And I use it in every aspect of my life to calm myself down, to allow myself to pause, whether it's personally, business, relationships, anything. But that's my go-to place to go to. And I've got clients who've used it in all different scenarios in their life to help them manage their emotions.
And it clearly works for your clients.
I'm sorry?
It works for your clients as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But for me, the F portion is pretty difficult to achieve, the forgiveness. I think forgiving the other person, forgiving yourself also is a little bit of a challenge, and this is something one will have to really work on. The two others, I think it's quite achievable. I'm talking about myself. I'm just as you speak of it, and as I was reading your book, I'm applying it to myself, obviously, because it's very relevant. I think it's relevant to pretty much every listener of our show, and it'll be very interesting for people to read your book. It's very well written.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I agree. It's forgiveness didn't happen overnight for me, right? And in all honesty, majority of people in my life I've forgiven. There's still one person that I find it very hard to forgive, and I'm still working on, right? But I think the question becomes, that makes it easier, is do I want to live with this heavy feeling that is holding me back in every shape and form, or do I want to understand or empathize why this person was this particular way, why I did the things that I did, and just try and move on for it. And honestly, Alexander, my forgiveness, the way I did it was writing journals and journals of what I feel or how angry I was, until I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I really don't.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, forgiveness is something that I myself need to work on, and perhaps need help with. But moving on to kids, your divorce and your children. How old were your children at the time of your divorce, Poonam?
They were 4 and 6.
You have boys, girls?
So my oldest is a boy, my youngest is a girl. They are now 21 and 23.
Okay. And how did they take your divorce?
You know, it was tough. And being a family lawyer, believe it or not, I actually did research before I got divorced. I went to people that I knew whose parents got divorced when they were 18, 19. And I sat down with somebody and I asked them, and even through the people that I had done divorces for, I sat down and I asked them, I said, so growing up in that household where your parents were fighting all the time, and they finally decided when you went to college that you wanted to get divorced, were you mad at them? And they said yes. They said because they could have saved us a lot of heartache. We wouldn't have seen that fighting every single day. We would have had a peaceful household. But instead, they thought that they were doing good for us by staying with us till we grew up. But in fact, it did more damage because our household environment was very conflicted. So for me, I had all kinds of thoughts in my mind. Maybe I'll try and wait. Maybe this, maybe that. Ultimately, I didn't have a choice because it was very volatile and I needed to get out. And in truth, over time, initially it was difficult. Over time, though, I don't regret the decision. And I think it was a peaceful way for the kids to get raised. Was everything perfect after the divorce? Absolutely not. But in time, their dad and I can be on the same page when anything major happens to the kids, and we can communicate, and the kids know that. And the kids know that despite the type of marriage, we can both be there for them.
Which is very,
which
very
I
important.
think is important.
Yep.
But honestly, Alexander, that from my perspective did not come until I could forgive, until I stopped being angry, at least from my perspective, right? I have a lot of reasons to be angry and say, I don't want to communicate with you and this, but I think divorce really is about how you react to it for your kids too. And that's why I do what I do, because I think people get so caught up in that moment that they think, I just want to destroy the person on the other side. And not only does that increase their legal fees, but it has an impact on your kids because the kids feel the stress, right? If you're a stressed out parent, the kids are going to feel it. You don't have to say it, but they feel it. And
yeah, they absolutely do.
Yeah, and I wish I could get across to people, and I tried when I was a family lawyer, and some people listen. I wish I could get across to people that, you've had kids with this person. Like it or not, they're going to be in your life for a long time. The amount of people that I hear, well, when my kids are 18, they don't have to be. No, that's not true. Because as your kids become adult children, your kids have other issues that arise in which it is important for a mother and father to be in their lives, right?
Yep.
It is important for the kids to know that their parents are on the same page, that the parents can't be manipulated because kids will take advantage of that. It is important for the kids to know. I mean, think about things, like it or not, if your kids have kids, you're both going to be grandparents. Are you going to be fighting till you're 60, 70 years old?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah, no, clearly it's in the best interest of the children for parents to be on the same page and to present the same front in as many issues or questions that arise due to co-parenting. But it's also important for children to be exposed to both parents. There's staggering statistics that shows that children that grow up in single parent household are less, they're more at disadvantage in terms of their personal lives when they grow up, and more at disadvantage in their personal life and professional life versus children who grow up either in whole family that is unbroken with papa mama under the same roof, or if parents divorce, then children spend more or less equal time or close to equal time with both parents. And these children, they tend to be more successful in life than children who live with just one parent, predominantly. Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. And I really do. And I think, so I have taken people to task for using the term broken home, because you can have a broken home even though two people are married, right?
Yes.
Just because you have a marriage certificate, but it can be very high conflict if there's constant fighting and the kids are raised in that environment.
Yeah. No. Okay. So let me refer. Perhaps I didn't express myself properly. Um, let's say there is intact home, meaning Papa, Mama live in peace with each other under the same roof, and obviously children live in one whole family, peaceful family. And the other alternative is that parents are divorced, but children live with both parents, or they're exposed enough to both parents.
So I would be interested in the dynamics, right, of the households, because in single parents, just like with two parents, in the single parent statistics are a lot of low income households too, in which those kids don't have the same opportunities, but they don't have the same opportunities even when there's married parents, right? So I think it's statistically, I'd like to know what the demographics of those statistics are, because I can tell you that there are people that I know whose parents are divorced, and when they've gotten married, they've made a much bigger effort to stay married to the spouse and make sure that their kids are not in a divided home, because they grew up in that environment and they don't want to be in that space. I understand, you're absolutely right. The statistics do show that if you come from a divorced household, you are more likely to be divorced. But call me idealistic. I also think that's because of this generational trauma that I talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you come from a divorced household in which you didn't have two loving parents, in which there was constant stress because your parents were doing everything for you, but still constantly fighting, and you were still in that constant stress environment, even though your parents were living apart because your parents are still fighting and you're still being used as a pawn, then you have created exactly what I'm trying to stop, is that second layer of generational trauma. So that child's trauma that was raised in that single household is still conflicted, still has their trauma, and because it hasn't been healed, they take that into their marriage.
Right.
And that's the exact component that I'm trying to work to minimize, right? And none of us are perfect. My situation is not perfect. But if we take ourselves to task, if we recognize what we're doing, where our trauma is coming from, we allow our kids to grow, we allow our kids the space to make their mistakes, we allow our kids to deal with their own emotional trauma and give them the space. So you will be amazed at the amount of people that I represent are afraid to send their kids to therapy. Why? Because they're afraid that their kid is going to say bad things about them. And that's the first thing I did when I got divorced, because if my kids need to say things and need to express things, I don't want them to feel that they can't talk to mom because they're going to upset her, or they can't. It's better that they go to a neutral party and start to heal those emotions so that they do turn into healthy adults.
Right. So then we are thinking child psychologist. Perhaps.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, I've got two kids who went to college who are on the, whatever the right path may be for them, and they're going to make their own mistakes and learn. But in my household, we're very open about therapy. We're very open about accountability. We're very open about you're responsible for your healing. If not, then you're going to take this into wherever you go, and that's on you. That's not on anybody else.
And so, Poonam, your advice for the parents to minimize the damage done by divorce to the children would be what? If you could just summarize, give synopsis of what would you recommend to your clients as a coach of what do we do to remove that generational trauma and to make sure that it doesn't get passed down generation down.
I think manage your emotions, whether it's the safe method, but find a mechanism in which, listen, through a divorce and thereafter, there are going to be so many things that you get upset at, so many things that you don't agree on, but manage those emotions. Even when you're married, right? You don't always agree with your partner, but you have to manage those emotions to move forward. And when there are things that are worth fighting for, and there are things that that you just need to let go of because it's not worth fighting for. And you need, when you're calm and you learn to manage those emotions, then you will recognize what is worth fighting for and what is worth letting go of. And therefore, you won't badmouth the other spouse on a consistent basis and make those kids feel bad. Because what you have to understand is it doesn't matter what the kids have seen. That's still their father and that's still their mother. So every time you do this, you're grating a piece of that child away. And you're making them feel like they're not worth something, because for that child, no matter what they've seen, their mother and their father is important to them. And if you don't let them deal with it now, I can tell you that I have met 40, 50-year-olds that are dealing with the loss of their father and have or mother and dealt with so much trauma in between because they were so confused.
I see.
So we as adults have a responsibility to take care of our emotions, manage our emotions, and we're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes. As again, I wasn't perfect, right? But you learn, and you learn to minimize that trauma. You minimize what's being said in front of the kids and let them just lead a happy, healthy life to the extent that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's an effort. But yes, thank you for this, Poonam. I think this is a good time for us to wrap up. I'd like to have continuation of this conversation in the nearest future, and to talk more in depth about application of your SAFE method, more about your book. We want to hear more about your personal experience and kids. Personally, to me, conversation about children and the effect of divorce on children, I find it very captivating. I have a number of friends who are going to be listening to this podcast, and they are in very similar situation, unfortunately, and they're looking for ways to minimize the effect of their divorce on their children. So this is immensely useful and immensely helpful to many people.
I appreciate, Alexander. I appreciate the opportunity. And, you know, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. The cost of your divorce and the outcome of it is dependent upon your reaction.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Thank you very much, Poonam.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Take care.